Hi, everyone. I'm Saskia Coward. I'm the Office and Volunteer Manager at Just Neighbors. Today, we are going to go over how to do a telephone intake by demonstrating the actual intake form that you would be using when completing a telephone intake. So as you can see, the questions will be laid out for you, and it's just a matter of filling in the information that's being asked from the person that you're speaking with over the phone. When we begin, the first section will be the interviewer. This is where you will write your name, as you are the interviewer that is speaking with the actual client or person that is looking for services for someone else. If the person is calling on behalf of themselves, you're going to check this checkbox here. If the person that is calling for someone else and they're just trying to help a person, whether it's a family member or a friend, you will enter the caller's name here, caller first name, and then caller's last name. You will ask the person, what is their relationship to the person in need of services? This could be a parent that's calling for their child. This could be an aunt, uncle, cousin, or sometimes we do have caseworkers that are calling for clients that they are working with. So you will click on the caller relationship, check the drop-down menu will give you the options you can choose from. If the person that is calling is not any of these listed here, you would just select other. And then here in the personal info notes, you will type in what the relationship of the person that is calling is to the person needing the assistance. This personal info box is also very helpful to write other information about the person in need of services. For instance, here we have language. You have English, Spanish, English and Spanish, and then other. If someone is calling in English, we would check off English or click on English. And let's say that their native language is not English. And, sometimes you can ask the person if they have a preference or what their native language is. And you could type that information in here. Sometimes we do have online intake forms that we have to input. So input into Salesforce. So in those cases, when we have those intakes, most of the time, English will be the language selected, or sometimes it's other. And then here's where we would write what the native language of the person is that they speak. The reason why this information is important is because should we be able to set up a consultation with this person, we would know what interpretation services they would need. We do rely heavily on volunteers. So we do have volunteers to speak many languages. So for me, since I coordinate that with getting an interpreter for a potential client, it's helpful for me to know what the language is that this client speaks. So that way I can see if in our database, if we have someone who would be able to interpret for that client.
Can you go ahead and like type the things in there so we can have them like as an example, like put a test name and like test name, like aunt and Amharic or whatever, just so we can have those fields test as a test?
Sure.
Okay.
So I will type in my name as interviewer, and I'm going to leave this unchecked as if this person is a caseworker. So we'll just use the name Ann, last name Smith, and this person is the caseworker. And I could type in here, caseworker from Fairfax County. Client's native language is Arabic. So I have put here other. And so here I'm putting, since I don't know the client's name right now, I'm just leaving it as client's native language is Arabic. As you see here, intake date will automatically be populated. So this is the date that this intake is being completed. For salutation, it is helpful to put Mr., Miss, or Mrs. Not always necessary, but it is helpful if in case there is a potential client that may have a unisex name. So it's helpful for us to know whether or not this is male or female. So when we call back, we know how to address them if they have a preference. So here in first name, this is where we are going to put the name of the person in need of service. So, as I mentioned earlier, Anne is the caseworker, and Anne is calling for Maria. And Maria's first name is put here. And then her last name, we will put Fernandez. And sometimes, there are people that have two last names. So it's okay to ask if there's a second last name. If they do have one, then we would put it here. So I'm putting Maria Fernandez Gomez. For company, this will always be N/A. This is just a field that we are not able to get rid of. So to make sure that it won't, we have something filled in there, we just put NA. Cell phone number, this is, I always ask what would be the best contact phone number. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Anne, the caseworker, is calling for Maria. However, she may say, well, Maria actually is able to accept phone calls, or she could say, Maria doesn't have a cell phone number, so I'll provide my phone number. So whatever best contact phone number to contact the client is what we're going to put here. And in this instance, I'm using the office phone number here. We ask, is the cell phone safe? This is it safe to leave a voicemail? Sometimes we do have clients that are domestic violence survivors and maybe have left a abusive relationship, so it may not be safe to leave a voicemail. So this is why we always ask, is it safe to leave a voicemail? They say yes, then we just click on yes. And then we ask, is there an email address you can provide? Some clients do have emails, some don't, or you'll have sometimes clients that say, I have an email address, but I don't check it often. If there is an email available, then it's helpful to put that in. So I will put in my email. And then how would you like to be contacted? Phone call, text, or email? We don't generally, this field is here. However, we generally like to make sure that we call the client back. So a lot of times you'll have people that say, oh, phone call is fine. However, sometimes there are people that, because of their jobs, they're not always able to answer phones, or they're only available to answer the phones during certain times. So here we could just put, please call after 2 p.m. as an example. And then here it's the birth date. So it is the month, date, and then you have to type out the year in the 4 digits. You could manually put it in, or you could use these drop down menus here as options. However, while doing the intakes, I have found that it's easier just to type in the date of birth. So I'm just gonna put in a birth date here. And then here you'll see that it says address. Now we are not asking for the physical address. Our primary question here, even though it just says address, would be to ask, what is their zip code? And when you type in the zip code, and I'm going to use the office zip code, you will see that it will auto populate on the top what the city to that zip code is. So then you'll just click on that, and this whole box here will auto populate. This is helpful because we are able to determine by putting this information in, once an intake has been completed, it will help the managing attorneys who review the intakes determine, where does this person live, and whether or not they're within our footprint of being able to provide service, that Just Neighbors is able to provide services. Once you get down to this section here, you'll ask if they've been vaccinated for COVID. Again, drop down menu, yes or no, or prefer not to answer. I'm just gonna put yes. And then how did you learn about Just Neighbors? Again, we have a drop down menu. A lot of times, clients will say, oh, I was given a list from immigration or, did a Google search. Sometimes, like I said earlier, they could be a domestic violence survivor. So the police or victim services provided Just Neighbors information. So you would just click on the option here, or if it's another organization that provided the Just Neighbors referral, it is very helpful to put here in the intake more information box what agency that was. So for instance, I will use Ayuda, which is another organization locally that does provide immigration legal services as well, but sometimes, due to capacity issues, had to refer the client out. So here I would just put Ayuda provided Just Neighbors. Oops. And this is just helpful for us to know how people are finding out about Just Neighbors. The next question is, have you or any family member spoken with Just Neighbors? And this question just pertains if this person has been a previous client of Just Neighbors, or if they have had family members that have received services from Just Neighbors. I'm just going to put no, but if, let's say they had, then here I could just put something like Maria's cousin was a Just Neighbors client. And I'll just put in a year in 2014. And oops. And then here is in the legal services needed. So this is where we ask, how can Just Neighbors help you? Or again, just keeping the flow of the conversation as natural as possible. You can say, so how can Just Neighbors help you? What type of services are you looking for? And in this case, again, since Anne was the caseworker that's calling for her client Maria, we can just say Anne is calling for Maria, who is in need of, we'll just say, a green card renewal. Since you are technically the person doing the intake, you are essentially the eyes and ears for the attorney. So any detailed information that's being provided to you is helpful to put in this box, because this gives the attorney who is reviewing the intake form a better idea of what type of services the client is needing. And also just sometimes there's, this also will help if we are able to set up a consultation. It will help the attorney to understand a bit more as to like if this person has a case that, has a lot of factors into it. As much detail as you can get is very helpful. The next part is the immigration information. So this part here is where we ask, where is the client from? Again, drop down menu to try to make things a little bit easier. And we'll just put that Maria is from Colombia. And then we ask, when did you enter the US? If they don't know the specific date, that's fine, as long as they can give us a year as to when they entered. So let's just say that she entered in 2019. And then the next question is, how did you enter the US? Enter without inspection is generally clients that have entered the US illegally through the borders. If they entered with a green card, a visa, or other. So we do have clients that have entered with visas. So in this case, if Maria had entered with a visa, the next follow-up question would be, what type of visa? So generally, this could be something like a tourist visa or a student visa. And sometimes they'll say like B1, B2. Um, during Immigration 101, which is a training that our attorneys do, they are able to explain a little bit better about the different types of visas that are available for clients. Um, and so this will help be a bit of help when understanding like when people are just giving you letters with numbers, what type of visa that may be. And so currently here, what immigration papers do you have? And since we had mentioned earlier that Maria is looking for assistance with a green card renewal, then that leads us to know that she has a green card. And then we would ask the follow-up question is how was she able to obtain um, that green card? A lot of times, we have clients that have had family members that have petitioned for them to be able to get a green card. Sometimes, depending on the type of cases they've had previously, they were able to obtain a green card. So we would put that information here. And then we ask, have they spoken to any other immigration attorney? So this is yes or no. Sometimes we have had clients that say yes. And the fees that private attorneys charge is sometimes way over their income limitations. So if let's say that were to have been the case, we can just type in here Maria um, spoke to an attorney who charged more than she could afford. Or it could be that maybe Maria had a consultation with an attorney and that attorney at that time did not have capacity to, be able to take the case. So they may have referred her out, to other organizations or even sometimes other attorneys, private attorneys. So just being able to gather here the information is helpful. Have you had any contact with the police? Yes or no? Sometimes, people will say, well, what do you mean? Well, in this case, let's say that Maria, has a car, and she's able to drive, she has a driver's license, and maybe she got pulled over for a speeding ticket. So, we would just put that would be something that we would put here as police contact because that is essentially is a police contact because she had to speak to an officer, for that traffic stop. Or it could be maybe that at some point, if a client has had to call the police, for a dispute or just, there was a noise that was happening where they live or something like that, we would take all that into account. Just again, it's detail that would be helpful for the attorney to know if there has been some type of police contact. If they say no, then you just simply put no and then move on to the next question, which is, do you have a court date? And yes or no, again, drop down menu. And then if they were to say yes, then we would put yes, and then we would ask what type of court. This does not only have to be immigration court. This could be a criminal matter. It could be a civil matter. So, if someone is maybe, currently being or currently separating from their spouse or partner, but let's say, there's they have children and maybe like they have to go to court for child custody or even child support, those type of things we still take into account even though it's not the type of law that we would help, but it's helpful for us to know that they may have to go to court for something. If it's immigration court, a lot of clients will tell us that they have a court date that they have. Sometimes it could be within the next few months or sometimes it could be like a year out from now, a year or two out from now. Just depends on their case. And if they have that court date, most of the time they'll be able to tell you when that is, and we would type that in here. So I'll just use an example of May 8th of 2025. Then, and back to the court date. Let's say this is like the first court hearing that the person will have. We can just say first um, court hearing. Again, this is helpful for the attorneys to know. We do have some clients who have had to go to court already multiple times. And so this is helpful for them to know whether or not this is like the first or maybe the last like court date that they have scheduled. For what is the next question, next section is household information. Now this is where sometimes it could get a little tricky. And primarily for the reasons as we get down here, I'll explain. So we ask what is their marital status? Single, married, separated, divorced, or widowed. We do ask. So a lot of our Spanish speaking clients will sometimes say that they, are looking for assistance for themselves and their esposo or esposa, which is wife or husband. However, sometimes they are not legally married, but they call their spouse partner, as husband or wife. So I always think that it's a good idea to ask if they were to mention that earlier on when we were in the section here, um, how can just neighbors help you? And sometimes, maybe we could just say Anne is calling from Maria, who's in need of green card renewal, um, and for partner. You could change it. You could always change this information here if more information is provided to you later on. And let's say here in the marital status, um, they say, oh, yeah, it's also for like my husband. I always think that it's a good idea to double check. Are you legally married? Because if they are legally married, we would mark it as married. But if they are living with a partner and they are not legally married, we would consider them single. So we would mark that single. Then we would ask here, um, if they are living with a spouse partner. You also see that it says parent or guardian. So sometimes we do have clients that are um, over the age of 18, and so but they're still living at home with their parents. So if that were to be the case, then we take into consideration, I'm sorry, that they are living with their parents or a guardian. So if they, say yes to either living with a spouse partner or they're living with their parents, then we would put yes. And then here you'll see, if yes, how many adults? So here is where it can sometimes get a little tricky if if the person isn't providing the information detailed to you. So if the person is single, legally single, however, they live with a spouse, or I'm sorry, with a partner. So this could be, boyfriend, girlfriend. You would put one for their partner. If the person is living at home with their parents or a parent, we would double check to see, okay, are you living with both mom and dad, or is this just mom or just dad? So depending on the answer, then you would put two. You would put one if it's just one parent, or two if it's two parents. And then we ask, are there how many children under the age of 18 live with you? Now, this does not have to be the biological children. This could be maybe you have someone who has younger siblings. Again, if they are living with their parents and they have younger siblings, we would take them into consideration. This could also be, adults who maybe live at home, older adults who live with their adult children and their families. So that those children could be their grandchildren. So we count those children as well. So here, this is where we would put the number of the children. This is where we would ask the age and the legal status of those children. So in this case, to keep it a little simple, I'm keeping it with Maria. We mentioned that she has a partner. So she is single because they're not legally married. She has a partner, so yes. And then here, we're putting one for her partner. and they have one child. So we put the number here, and her child is 5 years old, and her child, we'll just say, is a U.S. citizen, USC for short. Or if the child also was a green card holder, we could put green card holder. Or if, let's just say, the child is undocumented, then we would put undocumented. So depending on what the legal status of the child is, we would put it here. And I just typed these out so that you could see how we would put it out. And this would be, if there's multiple children in the home, we would put this for each child. So if the child is a US citizen, we would just leave it as USC. Then we ask, are there any other household members? Now, generally, this is other household members that contribute to the family income. So let's say that Maria is living with her partner and he's accounted for here. They have one child, that child is accounted for here. And let's say Maria's mother lives with them. So we would count 1 here for Maria's mother. And then we ask, are you supporting any family members overseas? And this would be, and you could hover over on the little I, this would be on a regular or monthly basis. So if she were to say, yes, I send money back home to my grandmother and my grandfather, we would count that as 2. Because she's on a regular monthly basis, she is sending money to Colombia to her grandparents to help support them financially. So the reason why we're asking all these questions here is because we have an income guideline that we use to determine, and each income depends on the number of household members. So if we have, in this case, we have a Maria, and then her partner, her kids, her mother, and then her grandparents, that technically would count as a household of 6 people. And so, again, depending on the number of household members will determine on what the maximum income is for the yearly amount. So for 2023, a household of 6 people cannot surpass 80,560. So once we know there's a number of 6 people here. The next section, we will have the income. Well, let's say that Maria is, she's working and she's making $10 an hour. We will put $10 here, and then the earning period would be an hour. And when we ask the question about, are you currently working? How much do you earn? You can take into account what they get paid every hour. Some people will tell you what they get paid every week or every 2 weeks. Some people will give you their salary. It's helpful. Whatever information they provide you in regards to their income is what you will select in regards to the earning period. So Maria said she works and gets paid $10 an hour, and she's working, we'll just put 30 hours a week. And then here we know that she mentioned that she lives with her partner. Let's say her partner is also working and is earning $10 an hour, and he's working 40 hours a week, and then his is also $10 an hour. Since we also know that Maria's mother lives with them, we would ask, is your mother working? Because we're taking into consideration her income as well. If Maria's mother, let's say in this situation, she's not working, we will just put 0. So that way that lets the managing attorney know that currently only Maria and the spouse are the ones who are working. And the third person who we have here as the number of household member is not working because we're putting 0 here. And then we ask, is anyone receiving government assistance? Now this could be, and this is yes or no. And examples of this would be if they are receiving, WIC, nowadays it's called SNAP, which is like essentially like food stamps, assistance, Medicare, Medicaid, those type of things. If they say yes, then we would put yes here. Let's say that they're getting SNAP. A good follow-up question would be, how much are you receiving? And most of the time, this is payments that is provided to a family on a monthly basis. So let's say this family is getting $200 a month for SNAP, and this is again assistance for food. We would put that information here, and then if let's say the child is also getting Medicaid, we would put that here as well. Other financial circumstances, this could be examples of either a person is unemployed, they're homeless, or other. So sometimes, depending on the intake and like the client, and it could be someone that they're currently in a homeless shelter, or it could be in a domestic violence shelter. We would just put that here. We would select homeless, and we could just list here that client is in a shelter and not working, and shelter provides basic necessities. Again, oops. Again, this information here is because you're kind of limited with this with the character numbers that you can put in these spaces. So that's just, this box here is just an overflow box where you can put this type of information, again, to help the managing attorney understand what is the situation that this client is going through. If there is no special circumstances, then you would just leave it as none. The next part, which is towards the end, is has the person been a victim of any crime? This would be yes or no. And then sometimes they say, well, what do you mean? What type of crime? And then we do have a drop down menu. Well, we have things listed, categories listed here. So examples of this could be maybe at some point maybe they were physically assaulted, or they've dealt with sexual abuse, whether as an adult or as a child, um, bullying, arson, burglary. So it could also be domestic violence. If let's say this person says that yes, um, they have been a victim of crime, let's say of domestic violence, you're going to select domestic or family violence, and then you're going to hit click this little arrow, and it's going to bring that over to this side. Let's say that they also have dealt with being harassed, so we will put that as well. And let's say you accidentally, you put this, you selected this and you made a mistake and you didn't mean to click on that. All you have to do is hover over and then just do the opposite arrow, and it takes it off this list. And then in this box here, you would put in, for instance, we put stalking and harassment. So we can say, going back to the name, Maria was harassed at work. Gotta love spell check. Was harassed at work in, again, I'll just put 2020, that scared her to go to work. Again, it like, because it's just kind of a general harassment, if you feel comfortable in asking like what type of harassment, you could just say, you could ask like, oh, could you just, give a quick example of like what type of harassment? You don't have to go into like too much detail, and then you could just say, Maybe the client says, "Oh, I was being verbally harassed by being called names." So then you could just put in parentheses, being called names or inappropriate names, we could say. So something along the lines of this is helpful. And then let's say she did say that she has had dealt with domestic violence. Then we would put problems with domestic violence. We would say yes. Maybe she was, um, physically and verbally abused by an ex-partner. Again, sometimes when it comes to this section, it can be a little difficult for some clients to like really provide information. You can, sometimes hear it in the hesitation of wanting to say anything, and you could always just say, I just quickly, you don't have to, go into too much detail. It was this, especially when it comes to domestic violence, was this physical, verbal, emotional. Some people unfortunately have experienced sexual abuse in relationships. Um, Sometimes there's been the power dynamic where their ex partner could have been financially taking all their money and not providing them with their money if they're the ones who are working. um, I always say that it's good to just, just have, you don't have to go into too much detail, because if we are able to, set up a consultation, you will have to explain this again. And we try not to like re-traumatize you with having to say this information over and over, because that in itself can be can be re-traumatizing, and difficult to talk about. There will be times that you could possibly have a caller who may actually cry. It's okay to ask them, are they okay? Do you need a minute to be able to continue? Again, a lot of times this could be the first time that, someone may understand that what they've experienced is considered domestic violence and they may not have labeled it as that. And so, just being there with them in that moment is super important. Okay, so once we get to this, we ask, were they married to the person? So yes or no again, and then what is the legal status of the person? So, U.S. citizen, green card holder, none, or other. Um, Generally for other, I select this when, let's say that someone experienced, like in this case, Maria was physically, verbally abused by an ex-partner. Let's say, let's add that this was in Colombia. So in this case, the legal status of the abuser would be other, because that person is not here in the U.S. So they wouldn't have, or, they just don't have any documents here in the U.S. So we would just consider that as other. Then we would ask, have you reported the abuse to the police? And again, in this case, we listed that she had, she experienced harassment and she had experienced domestic violence. And both of those instances were reported to the police in Colombia. Then we could put, yes, police report made in Colombia. A lot of times clients will be able to get copies of these reports if they don't already have a physical copy with them here. Um, but it is helpful to know if whether or not there was a police report ever made for whatever type of victimization that they've gone through. So once you get to this section, which is essentially the last question, you will hit save. Once you hit save, you'll see this little green box here that says client's name and then was created. You see that little green box, it means that everything was filled out correctly and Now their intake form has been saved in the list to be reviewed by our managing attorneys. At the end of the call, it's always when once you hit save, it's always helpful. You'll have this menu come back up. It is helpful to confirm the phone number with the person on the phone. So you could just say, okay, we've completed the intake form. Now your intake form will be reviewed. We'll call you at, and then I'm going to list the phone number 703-979-1240. That's a good way of confirming that you wrote down the phone number correctly and that we know for sure that this phone number is, the correct number to call, as well as they will have an idea of um, to expect a call from us. Now, this is helpful. This is the time where you also let the client know if we are able to help them. We will be setting up a consultation, and that we do charge $100 for the consultation if it's for one person, or $200 if it's for a family of two or more. But all that information will be provided more in detail, whether or not, once we know for sure if we can provide services to them. If we're not able to help them, then we let them know that we will still be calling them, but we'll be providing them the referrals for other organizations or low bone or private attorneys that can help them. And then I always also like to ask if they have any other questions, because it's always helpful while on the phone to be able to provide any answers that they may have to questions. Also, it's helpful to let them know that it will take a few days for the intake form to be reviewed, and generally depending on when you fill it out. So for instance, today is Thursday. I would say if we don't call you by the end of this week, we'll definitely call you by next week. I don't like to provide a specific day when we will call, only because we don't know for sure if the intake will be reviewed by that date. So it's always helpful just to kind of give that buffer room, but still letting them know how long, to kind of expect for us to give them a call. If we call and they don't answer, we always do leave a voicemail to ask them to call us back, so you can let them know that if they don't answer, we'll leave them a voicemail to call us back. All right. Okay, I think I'm done.